We're located about 3.5 hours north of here. If everybody knows where the Quad Cities, Rock Island, Moline, Davenport, we're about 20 miles east of there. And we just started distributing into the Missouri area in December. So we're just getting into our 4th month of distribution. Our beers are all over the place as far as in package and Randall's and Schnucks and Total and a lot of on-premise places as well. And so encourage you to go out there and look. But we're coming up on our 2nd anniversary in May as far as when we started brewing. We have a 15-barrel brewing facility back in Geneseo, and we have a 2-barrel pilot facility. So we can play around with recipes all day long and not have to tie up our main brewing system. And so some of the beers you're going to have tonight are from that pilot system as far as test beers. And so with me this evening, I have Logan Hamilton, who is my head brewer, and our other brewer is Jospeh Stoit. We're very excited to be invited here tonight for Cicero's Beer School. We appreciate it, and so what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it over to Logan, who is a former teacher, and you'll probably see that when he starts talking. So take it away, Logan.
All right. Is this on? I see a green light, but can you hear me?
Hey, Logan,
is it?
While you're talking, just shush everybody.
Yeah, and I'll write out the attentions too. I mean, I'm used to that.
That's your job.
Okay, like Steve said, yeah, I used to be a teacher. I got into brewing back in 2007. It was kind of a funny gig. My next door neighbor, who was my pastor, said, "Hey, we should try making some beer and do an Oktoberfest at church." All right, so we bought 5-gallon buckets and some basic home brewing equipment, and we made a wheat beer, and it turned out pretty good. I was pretty pleased with it. They all dropped off. We had our little Oktoberfest, but I just kept brewing, and so I always tell people that my pastor is the one who got me into brewing, and then I always tease people and tell them that it was my principal that drove me to drink so much I had to start brewing it professionally, so I had to leave. But anywho, but I'm looking forward to sharing our beers with you tonight. Like you said, we got 4 different beers. We're going to be going through our German Pilsner, which is called our Thunderstone. We've got our Rye Factor Red, which is an American smoked rye amber. We've got our Binary Espresso Stout, which is a oatmeal stout with coffee from Metric Brewing Company up in Chicago. And then we've also got our Shotgun Jesus IPA that uses a number of some new experimental hops, and we played around some new different hopping techniques with that as well to get some new, more robust hop aromas coming out of that. So that's a Yummelish new IPA that we got on the books. Joseph here, I'll let him introduce himself real quick before we get beers in our hand.
I'm Jospeh Stoit. I started working with Logan about a year ago, next month. I originally started homebrewing before I was 20 because it was the easiest way to get booze. Obviously, just make it yourself. They don't card you when you're buying grain. And then after I finished up my college, I started working with Koval Distillery out of Chicago. Worked there for about a year and a half, and then decided I really liked brewing a little bit more because I could drink more of it. And sent a text over to Logan, and here we are. So
yeah, it's a pretty awesome.
That's about it.
Yeah, we just kind of stumbled onto each other. We're like brothers.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was looking for an assistant, and then I got a text that said, "Hey, do you need an assistant?" Like, yes. Come now.
Literally, it was 15 minutes.
Yeah, it was pretty hilarious. So, but Joseph and I, we complement each other pretty well. He's really, we both love science. You have to in order to create beer and know how you're going to make beer and control beer, but you can only do that so much because beer is also its own living, breathing thing, and sometimes you got to follow it and let it do its own thing. But Joseph dives deep and even deeper into some of the science sometimes, so I'm going to be deferring to him if you have more specific science-based questions tonight. I'll give you some brief kind of overviews of the beer and certain notes you should be tasting in that beer and give you a little bit of background about some of the ingredients in that beer. And then if you have further questions, I'll cue my mad scientist. So feel free as we go through. I'm sure you guys, in other beer school sessions are shouting out questions. I'm happy to answer them. So put us to the test. So samples going out now. Is that? Couple minutes. While we're waiting for samples, any initial questions?
Where is Geneseo?
Geneseo, well, I know it took us about 4 hours to get here, and we're northeast, up by the Quad City area. If you're familiar with Davenport, Moline, right on the Iowa border, we're nestled right in about there. So it's a town of about 6,000 people. Our brewery also has a gastropub component to it too, where we showcase Neapolitan-style pizzas. Ooh, detentions all around. Neapolitan-style wood-fire pizzas, as well as a full-fledged gastropub menu with really unique burgers, appetizers. We got a really talented chef who likes to push the limit and use our beers to cook with as well. So, little background on Geneseo and Lionstone.
So, yeah, could you give us a little, you guys are a pretty newer brewery. Do you have any more background on how it got started? I wasn't listening very well.
No, that's fine. We started planning, back in 2014. Took about 2 years of planning.
Okay, so Logan and I have been homebrewing together for 7-8 years, and we've got a pool at our house. We have people over, and we give them our beer for, just for refreshments. And our friends would say, "Hey, your beer's really good. You should sell it." Well, your friends can tell you that, and so I decided that we were going to put it to the test. And so in 2012, it was between Christmas and New Year's, we had 2 blind taste tests in my garage. We had 2 styles one day and 2 styles the next. And we had 4 beers. We had our beer, a regional, a national, and an import. And we had a curtain, and nobody knew what we were serving. And our audience was everybody from Miller Lite, Bud Light drinkers to novice craft beer to one of our friends is a chemist at Goose Island in the lab. So we had a pretty broad spectrum experience as far as different experiences, and we scored really high. I mean, like impossibly high. It was like 14 out of 15 and one day, and we had 18 the next time, and we were scoring really high, and it's like, okay, so we've got something going on here. So Logan and I decided to go in 2013 to Washington, D.C. to the Craft Brewers Convention, where they show all the equipment, and they have thousands of brewers there that we could talk to. And so it was there we did our homework, and we started talking to vendors, and we started putting everything together. And I would say it was probably a year later that we put a plan together, decided to go ahead and jump into it, and then it was we had to look for a place to build the brewery. We decided to have a restaurant to go with it because in our area there wasn't any food trucks that could pull up and supplement. So we decided to put a nice restaurant in. We hired a chef, and but the main focus, thank you. The main focus for our brewery is distribution, and we're distributing in every place in Illinois except for Chicago right now, in the eastern half of Iowa, and now we just launched into Missouri, so mainly it's St. Louis, going to Columbia. Beginning of April, I'm going to be going down to Lake of the Ozarks and start working a lot of the places down there that I know. And but Logan is very, very, very talented, beyond comprehension. He's a lot better brewer than I am. And so I decided, hey, you want to go into this venture with me? And we said, we're going to go for it. Yep. And so that's pretty much, in a nutshell, a little long, but that's how we got started.
All right.
You want to add to that?
No, I want to talk about the beer now, because we got our Thunderstone Pilsner in your hand right now. So this is our German Pilsner. Uses Weyermann Bohemian floor malted German Pilsner malt, and Hallertau Hersbrucker hops, and Saaz. We have the luxury of well, both the curse and the luxury of building our own water profiles, because in Geneseo the water is so alkaline, all we could ever dream to make is a bunch of IPAs. So we build our own salt profiles like a lot of other big breweries do, so it gives us more controllability here. And so built that salt profile to help showcase, what a Pilsner is supposed to showcase, and that is malt and floral hops. This one is about 15 IBUs and about 4.7% ABV. Really crystal clear. It's leans more towards the dry end. It's not going to hang out too long on your palate. And I crush this one all day. Thunderstone Pills. Yep. Chose that name, kind of play on words with, because of Lionstone, Thunderstone. And Thunderstone, we were reading about, is like is a token, like a. Do you remember that?
It's a token
There you
to
go.
the gods.
Thank you.
In a lot of Northern European history, they would find axe heads and plow heads and stuff like that, but they were made of stone. And they thought that they fell from the sky when it thundered, and that's why they were called thunderstorm stones. But in reality, they were just like tools from Stone Age, prehistoric settlers to the area. But they honored them as tokens from the god, and they would pour milk and beer over them to please the gods. So, well, it's just like pouring some out for the homies.
Yeah, right.
Just a little bit.
And this one we were really excited. We sent this one into Beer Advocate to the Bros to get rated, and the Bros rated it at 87 on Beer Advocate. So we were really pleased to have that number attached to this by the Bros. So, yeah. Any questions about this one? Comments? No? Okay. Well.
This
saw him.
particular style brand
I'll get you.
will be coming available in the next several weeks as our distributor starts getting them in and distributing out. So you will see this out in the market in the next few weeks.
You got a question in the back? Yeah. Well, the sulfate content in the water really helps accentuate bitterness. And there's a lot of other chemistry that goes into it that also affects pH, and then pH in turn affects the ability to extract sugars out of your grain as well. Other components in that water, such as your calcium chloride, can affect mouthfeel, perceived mouthfeel, high calcium levels, make it really hard to create beers like, let's say you want an unfiltered hef, and you got a yeast and some proteins that are just kind of hanging out, making it hazy. That calcium also helps pull that out of suspension when sometimes you don't want it to, and then adds a bunch of mineral onto your tank. So it's kind of a nightmare. But to answer your question specifically about sulfates, they accentuate bitterness too. So every beer, yep, every beer. The water is like a blank canvas. It starts at everything is nearly 0 parts per million, not 100% zero, but less than a tenth per part per million. And so according to the style beer, if we're making a stout, we'll up some of the chloride in there to give it more of a fuller mouth feel. We have to introduce in different types of acids to control the pH, because like in your darker beers, roasted malt will actually affect that pH and take you down into a range where it's going to be harder for sugar conversions. And so we have to make it more alkaline by adding things in like sodium bicarbonate or baking powder to bring that alkalinity back up, so that enzyme within that grain can start to break down all those starches and turn them into sugars that the yeast wants to eat to make your ethanol. So,
It's
well, the
municipal.
city uses it's a well. Is
Yeah.
the city water, and so we bring that all in. We have a 1,000-gallon holding tank, and we turn all that water into 1,000 gallons worth of RO that we always have on hand, and then according to the recipe, we build our salts from scratch. So it's really nice to be able to do, because it gives you another component to the beer. A lot of people, you always see T-shirts for hops, barley, water, yeast for beer, but you can break that water down into many other subcategories to give you a lot more control in terms of how you want your beer to taste and look. So it's pretty cool to be able to do. Yeah.
So it sounds like this town is fairly small.
Yeah, it's about 6,000 some people.
So I'm wondering then, and you have well water,
Mhm.
did you have to make any special, do you have to do anything special with your wastewater?
No.
Because I know some people have had issues with the, with the yeast and things like that, then jamming stuff up on the way out.
Mhm.
You don't have any issues like that?
No, we have a pretty good sewer system and pretty good exit pipes. So, I mean, when that comes out of the fermenters, it's all liquefied straight down the drain, not a problem. The grain and such, that does not go down the drain. That goes out into a tote, and we got a pretty good farmer who shows up 11 o'clock on the dot every time we brew to take it to his hogs. So, yeah. So, yeah.
But yeah, our water is pretty hard. It's like 7.5 pH coming right out of the main, and it's really hard. It's really hard on our water softeners and our faucets, and so we run it through a water softener, then through a carbon filter, and then through a reverse osmosis. Strip her down, put it. We have a 1,000-gallon holding tank, and then Logan adds back the minerals. He's pretty much strips it down, adds back what he wants for each recipe profile.
So it really has nothing to do with the water source then, if you're doing all that.
No, I mean, yeah, at that point, really, I mean, a lot of breweries do the same. Your bigger breweries, they're going to control their salts. I mean, you have to because then at certain times of the year, and especially too when you get like heavy rains, and that disrupts the water table and dilutes it. Like even with our RO, we were having problems. We had heavy rain because the base water that we were stripping down, the pH was like way different, and then all of a sudden we're finding that our pHs are real low. We're dumping a lot of baking soda to bring that alkalinity back up, and calling around figuring, what the heck is going on? Is it our membranes? Is it our equipment? No. It's been raining for like 2 weeks straight, and the water table's all screwed up. But, still being able to do that, it gives you control. You can control, what is you're sending out the door, so your customers aren't like, this does not taste like the beer I had last month. It's always the same. So, but no, great question. Thanks for asking. The next one that you have in your hands right now is our Rye Factor Red, and it's American smoked rye amber. This one is 5.6 ABV and 53 IBUs.
I believe it's 5.8.
5.8 and 53 IBUs. He's bitter. He uses Breeze cherry wood smoked malt, and this one is one of our releases, usually in around September, and runs through early spring kind of beer. It's a sneaker. Sneaks up on you after you've had a couple. Even though it's only about 5.8. And it's got this really nice kind of elusive smoky aroma and flavor to it, especially when it starts to warm up. It goes awesome with smoked meats and barbecue burgers. It's a really cool beer. Actually started out as a pilot batch for a local bourbon bar. Their name was Barley and Rye, and they wanted something with rye in it, and so we started tinkering around with this. And we got some other fun variations of this that we've put in some oak barrels that are second use that had some of our imperial stouts in before, and then put this in on that. Gives it another dimension. It's pretty cool. A little bit of chocolate notes to it. So, Rye Factor Red. This one I think it's about 53, right? It's been a while since I've looked at the spec sheet on
This one's a little bit lower. It's an American red, so it's about 40 to 50.
It does.
Yeah.
And the rye gives it a bit of a crisp bite too. Yeah. Yeah. How do we get it? It's a malt that we use in the mash, and so that malt is actually smoked using cherry wood. Right after the malt stir prepares it for us to be able to convert it into sugars. And so yeah, it's a neat crystal malt, and it just smells beautiful the minute you put it into the mash tun. You just get that rich smoky flavor. Makes you want to sit around a campfire. It does. It really does. Anything smoky smells beautiful.
Broadening the brands that people can choose from, and there are going to be a variety of different styles and unique styles. So, but it will be available soon.
Anything else I can answer? It doesn't even have to be about this specific beer. Pick my brain.
You guys were saying you have a restaurant and stuff, but also your main focus was distribution. Do you feel
Well, the cool thing about, okay, so we're located right off of Interstate 80. I mean, literally, you can almost pretty much throw a stone and hit us. So as people are passing up through Chicago and to the Quad Cities, we're right there as a good destination point. The brewery is really kind of a postmodern industrial kind of style. Cement, exposed heating ducts, so on and so forth. Right back into the brew house is like a big fishbowl style glass window that's got to be at least a good 15 feet by maybe 5 feet tall. I mean, it's big. But we've been to a lot of other breweries where, the stuff is kind of obscurely hidden. You can kind of see through a window. Maybe the window's dirty. Maybe it's just so much going on back there you can't get the grand scope of it. But we designed the layout of the brew house in kind of this tunnel fashion and then designed everything else around it so that you could get full view of everything, including the fermenters and the whole brew house. And so pretty much everywhere where you sit within the tasting room or at the bar, you can see what's going on. And then just adjacent to that is, with our wood-fired pizzas, got a full pizza bar and the big Inferno Bravo wood-fired pizza, so you can see stuff coming in and out. You see fire. So it's really, it's set up to make people feel like they're part of the brewery. They're not just in a brewery, like they're part of what's going on. So yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
Are you guys kind of a big, I'm not from a small town, so I don't really know, but are you guys kind of a pretty big focal point for your town, like social scene-wise, like you guys do music or like late night things?
We do a number of different events at our town. I mean, the cool thing about our town is, well, let me tell you this. When I first moved to Geneseo back in 2009 to get my teaching gig there, my wife and I were both blessed to both be hired at the high school in Geneseo. I called in and then they to get the interview, and they called me back and said, "Hey, I got a wife who's a math teacher. You got any math jobs?" And I said, "Yeah, you can go along and bring her." So the argument's always been, who did they want more, me or you? But anywho, we settled on Geneseo because driving through the town, at that point there was like one empty storefront on the main drag. That was it. There was some newer developed strip malls that were popping up. And then we jumped on the Chamber of Commerce website. We saw all these other cool events going on in the park. So the city's very active. And so that helps with a lot too, because every time the city does something, they pull us in. We're always helping with different fundraisers. We're doing tasting events in the park, doing tasting events for the park district for some new facilities they're trying to build. So the city is really forward thinking, and it's pretty cool.
Well, kind of a funny side note, it was actually my wife that found Logan because he got his position at the school district as an art teacher. He actually worked under my wife, who's been in the district for 33 years as an administrator, and said, "Hey, my husband loves home brewing. You guys should get together." And that's when we started brewing together. So, yeah.
Yeah. Looks like you got the binary coming out now.
Steve, what's the long-term plan?
The long-term plan?
Because it's a pretty small operation now, so where do you want to be in 10 years?
I told him in 10 years I'd be happy to be in charge of his production facility that we're going to have in Europe. My plan.
Well, actually, export is part of our plan.
There you go.
We're looking into exporting our beer to Scandinavia, UK, and Western Europe to begin with. I mean, there's a very easy way. Our 12-ounce cans become a 355 milliliter can with a different label, and with the new technology now, as far as the skin and the sleeves that go over these cans, you can change them very easily. You don't have to have a truckload of cans printed up anymore, okay? And then also, they have one-way kegs, plastic kegs, 30-liter kegs. You fill them up, you put them in a container, you send them over to Europe, they drain them, and then they recycle them. So you don't have to worry about getting your cooperage back. So that is part of our long-term plan. We are talking to some export companies on that. But as far as locally goes, we want to be a regional brewery. Illinois, Missouri, Iowa, We're probably going to be going into Wisconsin in the near future, maybe Michigan. And but distribution is our main focus, and so distribution and just talking, getting some unique beers out there. I mean, we meet every Monday morning, the three of us, and we just brainstorm about beer and what we have, what we're doing, what we could do, what's hot, what's not, what we think might be hot, what we like.
I'm going to take a question
Pardon?
too. I'm going to take a question too.
It's kind of a follow-up about what you're saying, but I guess I'm wondering from you guys kind of making that decision, looking to like where places you might want to export to in Europe, have you noticed that there are like certain flavor profiles that are really appealing in Europe that we tend to do more here, that you in particular tend to do that think that would be really successful there, or is it about the, do you think that like, I guess, who you'd be brewing for in Illinois is the same as who you'd be brewing for in Scandinavia?
Gotcha. You and
Well,
Hunter have been
we're
a bit more involved
talking
in that.
to several distributors. Actually, the one I had most conversation recently was in St. Petersburg, Russia. They love anything American. I don't care if it's IPA, anything American. It's kind of like American jeans. You got to have American jeans, okay? But we're taking our time. We're being very careful. I mean, we want to make sure that product gets over there, and it's very different over in Europe. I mean, people go into the grocery store, they buy a can or two. They don't buy a 6-pack or 12-pack or 32-pack. They just go in and buy a can. And so we'll send over case flats, and they won't have the Pack Tech snap-on lids. They'll be all loose, So, but that's kind of down the road here, and
It is named Binary Espresso Stout because it uses binary espresso beans from Metric Coffee Company up in Chicago. We developed a pretty cool relationship with them a number of months ago. They're a really cool craft roastery, and they make some pretty rockin' stuff. We also use their Quantum for our Imperial version of this. But this is our oatmeal stout. Uses Fuggle and Nugget hops in there. It's about 4.7%, 45 IBUs. The coffee on this one is cold extracted. That's we do that so that it's a bit more mellow, not as acidic, just like you would do cold brew coffee, for the same purposes. Putting coffee beans in the kettle, you're going to get a lot more acidic tartness out of that coffee. So we do it all cold side. I mean, it is what it is. It's a darker, around 50 SRM body, and I'd say medium light mouthfeel. We keep this one on nitro as well at the brewery. So, you got anything to add about this guy? I mean, it is what it is. I mean, it's a beautiful, just like coffee, oatmeal stout.
Well, we've been working with a couple of different roasters. Metric has been really good. They're out in Naperville, and another one we've been working with is Black Rifle out of Utah, Salt Lake City, Utah. That's a group of veterans, and they've got some great coffee, and so we've experimented around with that too. We really hadn't gotten into the coffee stouts until recently, but we were very, very pleased with the beans that we got from Metric, and it turned out really good.
Yeah. What is a binary coffee bean? If you're asking me about the origin, I really couldn't tell you. I'm sorry, I don't have the bag with me.
Well,
but binary. I mean, that's the name itself is a specific name they have for their product that we just repurpose for ours to let people know that that's what we used in it. I don't know.
Yeah, when you go buy the coffee in their store,
the origin of the binary?
or buy it, it's called binary espresso, and that's the blend. So we ended up using that same name in our name for our stout.
Yeah, that company was pretty cool. They when we called them and said, "Hey, we want to do a coffee stout," they're just as passionate about coffee as we are about beer. And they said, "Well, okay, well, let's make sure that we have the right pairing. What notes, flavor components are you going to have in this?" And it was a cool back and forth. Just, well, we expect it to be this, and we are shooting for this kind of flavor profile. And they narrowed it down to a couple different beans that they wanted to showcase and make sure that we weren't choosing something off in right field that just was not going to match and give people a bad impression of their product as well. So it was a cool collaboration. They make some beautiful nitro coffees that are cold brewed. So we've had some of those on draft before too, and they got a really amazing machine that's all self-contained that injects that nitrogen in line as you do the cold brew. It takes about 18 hours, something like that. They do it overnight. You drop off a keg, they fill it up for you. It's pretty cool. Yeah.
What is nitro coffee?
Well, it's
Nitrogen.
it's nitrogen infused, and you serve it on a nitro draft. The thing about nitrogen is it's very hydrophobic. The minute that it's exposed to any kind of atmosphere, it's going to jump out. It's not like CO2 when it turns into carbonic acid, stays into solution. Yeah, it's not going to do that. And so they have to inject it in as it brews to keep it in suspension under pressure. So then the minute you serve it on nitro, that's what makes it really creamy and frothy. It's all that nitrogen ripping out and making it kind of creamy. Yeah, it's pretty cool. So that in cold brewed coffee, it's served cold off draft.
Well,
it's pretty cool.
when you look at the tap systems out there, the majority are strictly 100% CO2. But we have a gas mixer in our walk-in cooler. And so for the first 4 taps, which are nitro taps, there's a mix of 70% nitrogen and 30% CO2 that goes into those taps. And then on the other taps, it's 60% CO2 and 40% nitrogen. Okay? Just so it gets a little more, helps with the creaminess.
Yeah, I mean, it's that blend. It's going to create a different kind of head texture. I mean, the reason that they carbonate beers at different levels too is not only just for the amount of carbonation, sparkly, so to say, that you feel in your palate. I mean, the bitterness, the carbonic acid that goes into solution lends a different flavor profile as well. So, yeah.
Really came up with it. I just woke up one morning. I'm like, Shotgun Jesus, that would be a pretty dope label, Either Jesus riding shotgun with a shotgun, or just Jesus with a shotgun. Maybe Terminator style with the pump.
Right.
Or Jesus shotgun in a beer. Right. There are plenty of opportunities there.
Or you can go with the enlightening explosion of hop aroma on your nose as you drink it. Yeah. Or enlightening blast of hop aroma.
Really, it just seemed like a cool name. That's how most of our names come about. We just think they're cool.
Well, that's what you got to do.
So with this beer, we were really trying to go for more of, I don't know if you guys have heard of like Northeast IPAs or Vermont IPAs. Trillium, Farmhouse, they do a lot of those. And the yeast are in suspension, and they use a specific yeast called Conan, or it's really like a London 3. It doesn't flock very well, and it kind of leaves a little bit of body to it, a little bit of residual sweetness. So we were shooting for one of those, but we didn't have one of those yeasts in-house. So we decided to use our West Coast yeast, and that's why it's so clear. The haze you see is mostly from the hop oils themselves. Because with this beer, it is about 33 pounds of hops in an entire 15-barrel batch. And in that brewing process, we boiled it for 60 minutes, turned off the steam, let it sit for about 5 minutes, let it cool down to about 210 degrees. Then we threw 15 pounds of hops right into the kettle. Most of the times you do that just for aroma, but we added 15 pounds of like high AA or alpha acid hops for the aroma and the bitterness in that time, because while you're whirlpooling, it's still isomerizing the hop oils. But it's just, if we had added those 15 pounds of hops in at 60 minutes,
A lot more bitter.
we would have had something probably around 150 IBUs.
It'd been a pucker.
So this beer is only 5.5%. It is about, I want to say about 70% two-row 15% flaked oats and 15% malted rye. There was no caramel malt in this. The SRM is probably about 4.5 or so. The IBUs are only 45, and that's what we got out of the whirlpool. And then we dry hopped 3 times. Once during active fermentation, so the yeast could convert some of the glucanosides into fermentables, but also a biotransformation of the hop oils into different compounds. And then we dry hopped once primary ceased, and then we dry hopped again 2 days later. So I think it was about 5 pounds each time. So it's a hop bomb. And the hops we used were Caliente, 007. We used a little bit of Columbus to kind of balance it out, some Citra to balance it out. We used some Simcoe to kind of add a little bit of pininess. And really, we were just going for something that was just straight up fruit and just in your face about it.
Yeah.
And that's kind of
That's why we went with shotgun.
Shotgun
This
Jesus.
is why this guy, I call him the mad scientist too. So, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. So this one, we're probably only going to brew this once, but version 2.0 is going to be a lot better. We're going to change up the yeast, change up the hops, but it's still going to be in your face, fruity explosion. So if you
We're
like
kicking
this
it up a
one,
notch.
you guys will love version 2.
I just hope you keep this mouthfeel. I think it's the oils.
We will.
Thank you.
I love hockey beers, but I just can't drink them because they always I'm like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is a good, this base recipe,
the mouthfeel, I can drink them all day.
yeah, this base recipe is one that we've tinkered with before, and we've always just kind of come to like. It was one for a pilot and collaborative batch we did called Hop Frolic back last year. It was a collab we did with Behemoth Brewing Company out of New Zealand. We hooked up with them when we were out in Portland, and we were just talking over beers about, hey, we should make a beer together. And so it was 50% American, 50% New Zealand ingredients. And together with him is how we kind of came up with this base recipe that was just pretty much 2 row, a little bit of rye, and
Yeah.
that was it. But this time go around, let's throw some oats in there. Let's see what happens. But Joseph mentioned, as brewers, we're always looking for the next batch. That's both that's the curse of being a brewer, and you're pretty much like as an artist, we were never satisfied with our work, and as brewers, we're always looking for ways to just keep pushing forward and make it even better. So that's why we're already.
And you're also
thinking for
still
the
never
next one.
satisfied with your work. You want to move on to the next one, but unfortunately, you have to move through 15 barrels of beer.